Welcome to our podcast, She's Bridging the Gap, where we're on a mission to bridge the gap through conversations that inspire change and build lives, businesses, and healthier minds. I'm Sam D, and I'm a certified nutrition coach and personal trainer.
I'm Hanah Harvey, and I'm a business coach and strategist.
And I'm Kendra Garrett, a mindset and accountability coach. In this podcast, we're going to bring you the tools you need to bridge the gap between your health, wealth, and relationships.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of She's Bridging the Gap podcast. Today, we're talking about lessons we've learned in business and the things you need to know before making the mistakes that we have made. The first thing we're going to talk about is trusting your gut over overthinking everything and just going with what your gut or your heart is telling you to do.
Yeah, so I recently read in John Acuff's book, Soundtracks, which it really intrigued me, where he talks more about the brain and how things worked, where our gut instinct is more like our heart's, like that first thing, gut reaction is really what your heart is telling you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of the, I think he said like the limbic brain that gives you those reactions versus, I can't remember the other part of your brain where it wants to rationalize, which I mean, I am all for rationalizing if a decision is good or not. However, sometimes rationalizing it becomes overthinking it and overcomplicating it and becomes overwhelming. And that's where he gave the example where as students, teachers will tell their students taking a test, like multiple choice question, go with your first instinct. Whatever you think it is, go with that, because the more you question it, and I can remember that as a kid thinking, okay, oh, this is it. And then I'm like, wait a minute, 5 questions later, I'm like, oh, let me go back to that one. I don't know if that was right. And I change it. And my first instinct would have been correct. So that's just kind of what I think about now, of going back to the beginning of trusting those instincts rather than trying to be like, oh, well, is this the right decision? Or maybe this is, or maybe this is. But that whatever that first instinct is, I'm not saying it will always be right, but it also gets you to that point of saying, oh, there's that first instinct. That's the decision I'm going to go for. And then you find out sooner rather than later if that was the path that you want to be on, rather than over rationalizing it. And you've gone months wondering what you should do or not do. And then, okay, I guess now I'll take this. And then maybe have another few months of, was that the right choice?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm backtracking to the first reaction that I initially had 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's where I got that.
Yeah, I feel like it's also trusting yourself to know what you really want or that you really should do. And I mean, what you were just talking about, where like you're questioning your decision for months and then you make another decision, you question it again. Like if we can just trust ourselves to know that deep down we know what's best for us, then we can move forward with so much more confidence. And what I don't know if it was in a book or maybe it was from Soundtracks too, because I know Kendra has talked about this book more than once. I love it. It's talking about like the 5-second rule. Like you will know within the first 5 seconds what the answer is. And then after 5 seconds, the rational side of your brain comes in, and then is trying to like convince you otherwise. So like, you know it in your gut. Don't let your rational brain try to keep you safe and try to keep you from like going all in on something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So whenever he was talking about this in the book, it made me think, which he might have actually referenced, I don't know, there's the people say, and it's actually in the Bible too, it's a Bible verse multiple times, of where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And that reminded me of like, wherever my heart is, like that's what's most important to me. So that's what I need to listen to the most, because in turn, that's what's going to, like whatever I'm doing is going to come back and show what is important to me and what I believe is true, or, you know, what I can do. Like you said, you know, trusting yourself, that has a big part to play, in my opinion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think also like trusting yourself when it's a no, like when your gut tells you no, yeah, but then your brain's like, but it actually makes sense to do that, but my gut's just not. Yeah. I was talking to someone about working with them for coaching, to like hire a new business coach, and I was talking to them and like their program made sense for me. It felt like it was the next natural step for me, but like never once on the call did my like gut say yes to it. And I was like, at the end of the call, I was like, I'm sorry, it's a no. Like I just don't feel it in my gut. That's just the fact of it.
Yeah.
That's such a good point to make, because I know I've done that too, of like, oh, well, this is what I should be doing for my next step, or what I should be investing in, or the action that I'm taking, or this is what's working for everyone else. But when it doesn't feel right to me, it's not going to work. And I'm going to have resentment towards that.
And the same goes like for like getting clients when you're looking at it as a good chunk of money. Maybe they're going to be paying you $2,000 a month, but your gut is saying, I don't want to work with this client, but I need the money. Don't work with the client.
That's actually funny that you say that. One of my clients in my group program just recently turned down a very high paying client that, I mean, she was weighing the pros and cons and everything, but she went back to her first gut instinct that said, I don't think this is the right fit. It would affect my time boundaries that I've put into place of the time freedom that I want. And it was a good thing in the long run, because like she wants to continue working with clients that give her that time freedom still, even though she turned down a very large retainer project client that that's hard to do sometimes, but in the long run, you feel that relief and you feel good about your decision whenever you trust that gut instinct.
Absolutely. So the second lesson that we want to talk about that we've learned over the last couple of years in business is putting boundaries in place and enforcing them. So maybe we can talk about some examples or just talk through our experiences of how putting boundaries in place. We wish we had done it sooner, and we wish we had stuck to it better.
And that goes for all aspects. I never put boundaries. I've been in business now 3 years. And I never put boundaries with some clients, and I never put boundaries with my family. So it was like all willy-nilly. It was just like, yeah, I can get that done, and putting my family on hold or vice versa, and just not like having those clear lines of this is when I work, this is when I don't work. And this is what I'm willing to do, and this is what I'm not willing to do. So definitely boundaries before you sign your first client is probably a great thing to do.
Absolutely. I agree. And I don't feel like that's thought of. It's almost like boundaries need to be part of your business plan. I feel like that is whenever you are creating the business, that needs to be part of the plan as well, and figuring, which they can change. Like, once you get in and test and tweak and realize what works, what doesn't. But if you have at least, a few foundational boundaries set, it gives you a great start.
So when I first started my business, I started out as a virtual assistant, and I had this one client who I didn't set boundaries with in the beginning because I just wanted them to like me, and I wanted them to keep me forever, and I wanted to just like do all the things for them, respond to them anytime. And so what happened was, like, the Voxer notification, like it's that like, I think whoever has Voxer knows what it sounds like. And it got to the point that like whenever I would hear that Voxer notification go off, my like chest would drop, like my heart would go into my stomach, and I'd be like, oh no, what's wrong? What did I do wrong? And so like that's a really good example of like, okay, we needed to set boundaries. We needed to turn off notifications or let her know when my office hours were, and stick to it. Instead, it would go off in the evening. It would stress me out. I'd have to go respond to it because I was so stressed about it. And then I'd miss the evening with my husband. And so like, if you can set boundaries and just avoid that from even happening, I think that would be really awesome.
Yeah.
That actually reminded me of what my thought was the notification aspects of it. Because one of a different person in my group program was responding to one of her clients' emails in the middle of the night, like at midnight.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, what can we do to stop it? Which I have for a while now. I put my phone in sleep mode from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And that's what I recommended for her, where, like you can have your favorite contacts. They are still able to contact you by phone or text if need be, but everything else is silenced. And you can do that sooner, if you want that to happen at 5 o'clock till 8 o'clock, 5 p.m. at the end of the day till 8 a.m. the next, like whatever time frame. But I think I didn't realize how beneficial it was for me until she was talking to me about this. And I was like, oh, maybe try this. And then I was like, oh, this has worked really well for me. And it's now working really well for her. if that's you out there, like one of our listeners needing to put that boundary in place to protect your own time, that is something that you can do to not have those notifications always pop up. Because I feel that too. Like whenever I get a client message on the weekend, oh man, and I need to go take care of that. And it's like, no, like the more you take care of those things on your off time in the evenings, weekends, middle of the night, or whenever those times are for you that you don't actually want to be working, the more you respond during those times, that sets that expectation of your client that you will be available during those times. And then whenever you're not, that might cause some friction there. So the more boundaries you can put in place now of you will not be responding during X, Y, and Z times, setting those notifications however you need to set them, the better for you and your clients.
Yeah, if you don't already have your Facebook and your email notifications turned off, please do that. And my phone is on silent all the time. I got in the habit when Hazel was little. I would be getting like messages during her nap and it would like wake her up. And so it's like, okay, phone's going on silent. And I love it so much. My phone is still on silent. Like, whatever you got to do to like bring more peace into your life, do it.
Yeah, I recently started like a new boundary that I'm setting is turning off my notifications for everything except for my son's school and my husband and my mom during the day when I'm working. So I'm like, I have no distractions. There's nobody bothering me, nobody calling me, and I can just get stuff done in that time that I want to get it done instead of having to do it at night or on the weekends.
Yeah. It's so worth it. It just made me think of like when setting boundaries, I like to think about it in terms of like, is the sacrifice worth the reward? Is like, and is going like not enforcing a boundary, would that sacrifice of not enforcing the boundary, letting someone like come over the boundary, would it be worth the reward? So like, are you being compensated for like working on the weekends when you're not supposed to be working on the weekends? And is that reward worth your sacrifice of needing to work on the weekends? Or is the reward of having people being able to like message you, like it just has to be worth it? And only you know that.
And it's also relatable. Like I recently crossed over into the content creation world. So I'm very much in that mode a lot of the time. So I'm filming, I'm editing, I'm doing all of that. And I forgot where I was going with that.
Happens to be all the
time. Okay, now I remember. So it's very relatable in that aspect too, because you have to know, like, even though you don't feel like you're quote unquote working because you're just putting your content out and doing that, you're still working and you're still focusing on those things. And I had to learn that lesson the hard way when my husband was like, hey, when are you going to not work on the weekends? And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that I was doing that. So I had to like set boundaries there too, just like I would for clients. So treat yourself like a client if you are doing things like that, like content creation.
Yeah, I still struggle with that sometimes of like I time block for things, but if something comes up while I'm trying to create posts or whatever for my own business, I'm like, oh, maybe I should go work on this. And I have to be very diligent about no, like don't even read it. Like this is the time, like I am still in this 1 hour time block and this is what it's designated for. Unless, there's fire happening and we need to put it out. But like otherwise we are in this time block and this is what we're working on because this is what my day was scheduled for.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we move on to the last one?
Yes.
So I'll just introduce this one and then you guys can talk about it.
Okay.
Okay. So our third point of some lessons that we've learned is overgiving versus putting a bow on it or that nice cherry on top, rather than overgiving of yourself, where you feel resentment maybe towards your client, family, yourself, and you're starting to be taken advantage of rather than just putting that extra foot forward to put a bow.
Yeah, I think there's a huge difference in the way that these feel, right? Like overgiving versus putting a bow on it. When you're putting a bow on something and you're just like going above and beyond, it's like out of, I don't know, like the pureness of your heart, right? It's just like to do it to make them like put an extra smile on their face or to make them extra happy or to I don't know, just make them feel better, right? But when you're in that state of over giving, it's more like, oh, I don't like doing this. Like,
Yeah.
I can't believe they're asking me to do that too after I've just done all this other stuff. They want me to spend another 3 hours and do that thing. Ooh. And so you feel like you're being taken advantage of. You start to resent the entire contract as a whole. And so, I don't know, like when it comes to overgiving versus putting a bow on it, I think it comes back to like clear expectations, clear boundaries, and the like going above and beyond shouldn't be an expectation that your client has for you. It's something that you can give to them as a gift versus something that they're expecting, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So that even is good clarification for myself here right now. So what I am hearing you say, just kind of correct me if I'm wrong, is pretty much like the putting a bow on it is what you come up with. It is your own idea to be like, oh, like I see this, why don't I go ahead and go this extra mile to over deliver for my client, rather than them coming up with, hey, will you do X, Y, and Z on top of the contract we've already agreed upon? Is that basically like it needs to come from your ideas, not your client asking you to put a bow on it or over
Right.
Yeah, because if your client's asking you for something in addition to the contract, then that's up for additional charges, right? But if you're saying, oh, there's this little thing, it'll take me less than 30 minutes or less than 10 minutes, let me just gift this to them just to put a smile on their face.
Great clarification.
Yeah. And I think that it doesn't have to be all the time either. It's not, I think in the beginning when I first started, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to be like, what can I do with this video or with this post that is going to make it really stand out, but there wasn't anything extra that I can do. So it's definitely something that you have to make sure there's space for. And it's not an every time thing. It's just when you see it fit.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it's probably not something that you're like, oh, I have this contract and then every time I do this one extra little thing. If it's something that's every time, you can go ahead and put it on the contract.
Right.
Yeah.
Versus like, I don't know, if you have a client who maybe I'll just use copywriting as an example because that was my world, right? So if I have like a copywriting client and I see that they want like all these posts written and then they mention something about like wanting an ad done, and I know an ad is going to take me like less than 10 minutes to write, especially if it's going to just be like a little short, like less than 10 words, right? I'm like, oh cool, I'll just send the ad copy to you, don't worry about it. And that feels good for me to be able to do that because I'm like, oh yeah, I just put a bow on it, I just made them really happy, and that ad's going to do really awesome for them. And so if you can feel good about it, then put the bow on it.
Yeah, for sure.
But if they were like, hey, I need ad copy, I'd be like, cool, here's what I charge you for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a monthly thing that they're asking for, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can find our podcast, She's Bridging the Gap, on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and on YouTube if you want to watch the live video chat.
You can subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss a single episode.
And we're so excited to start helping you build your bridge.